Radio TV phono nut here, and yesterday I was by one of the thrift stores that's privately owned, and we were discussing TVs, radios, that sort of thing, and he said, well, I've got 3 flat screen TVs that don't work. And I said, what are you going to do with them? He said, well, if you want them, you're more than welcome to them. He said, you know, people often bring stuff by to donate it, and we ask them if it works, and they tell us it does, and then they get out of here in a hurry, and then whenever we test it, we find out it doesn't work, and then we have to dispose of it. So if he said if you want these TVs, you're more than welcome to them. One of them is this Emerson that we have torn apart here on the dining room table. I believe it has an LED backlight issue. What happens is you turn the set on, the logo will flash up for about a split second, and then the backlights go off, and then the set shuts down. And that's a common problem with LED backlit televisions. They're cheap made to begin with, and they usually come from the factory with the LEDs set at maximum brightness, and after a few years one or more of the LEDs will either short or open, and then your TV no longer works. These circuits have fault detection circuitry built into them, and if it detects that the LEDs are drawing too little or too much current, then it will usually shut the set down, especially in a case of too much current. And I think that's what's happening here, that we have one or more shorted LEDs that's causing too much current to be drawn, and that shuts the TV down. So one thing you can do to try to get a little bit more life out of your television is go into the menu and select the backlight option and turn the backlight brightness down as low as you possibly can, and still get a suitable picture. Generally about halfway is good if you can do that. That way your LEDs are not as stressed, and hopefully they will last a little while longer, because technically, given the cheapness of televisions today and the labor involved to do it, it's just really not worth tearing one down and replacing LEDs in one. However, this one we're going to have some fun with it, and if we ruin it, then so be it. The other TV is some Chinese off-brand crap that's totally dead. And then the third TV is a Hitachi that looks like it has an issue with either the panel or maybe the T-con board. We'll look at that too, but right now I want to focus on this television, and I already have it halfway apart. In order to get the back off to access the boards, you have to remove this plastic cover, and then in order to access the panel, you have to remove all of the screws around the perimeter here, and then you have to disconnect the speaker and finagle this plastic assembly out of the way. And then you have to disconnect this ribbon cable that goes to the panel down here, and that's done by using a fingernail to flip back this little black plastic lock, and then carefully pull the ribbon cable back, and then we flip it up and flip it over and carefully lift everything out, and being very careful not to damage the panel. The panels in an LCD television are, as I'm sure you know, extremely fragile. It does not take much to damage one, and if you damage the panel, then it's going to be game over, because the panel is going to cost you more than what a new television set would cost, and you just don't want to do that. When I first opened this up, I looked for things like bulged capacitors here. Don't see none of that. Now that doesn't automatically mean that all of these capacitors are good. We could still have a capacitor with high ESR and it not be bulged out the top, but it's kind of doubtful. Another problem you want to look at on these flat screen TVs is the screws here that hold the circuit boards in place. oftentimes they use the metal frame here as a means of grounding the boards, and what happens over time, these screws will become loose just from general use and heating and cooling, and a lot of times I doubt these screws are tightened sufficiently from the factory, and what happens is you end up with a faulty ground connection that can cause all kind of weird problems with the TV. So, you know, when you have a flat screen that's acting up, it's usually not worth putting a lot of time or money into it, but it might be worth opening up just to check the basics. Look for bulging capacitors and make sure all of your mounting screws are good and tight to establish a good ground connection, because who knows, you might get lucky and just fix your TV without having to spend much time or money on it. I can tell you, I have not worked on a whole lot of flat screen TVs. I generally try to shy away from them. I really don't like fooling with them. But I can tell you, out of the ones I have looked at over the past, say, 15 years, I can only think of 3 that I actually fixed. And one of them wasn't a TV, it was a computer monitor that belonged to the church. And it had a puffed up capacitor in the power supply. And then the second TV was a Samsung 30-something inch that belonged to an elderly couple at the church. It had an intermittent power on condition. The caps were okay, but there were some bad solder connections on the power supply board. And then the third TV I fixed is one that's currently here. I think that was back in 2015 or 16. A 32-inch Samsung that was about 3 years old at the time. It developed a problem, and the people that owned it called a TV shop about it, and they told them on the phone without even looking at it that they'd been looking at least $250, and the set wasn't worth putting that much money in. So they went and bought a new TV, and were just before throwing out the old one when they remembered me, and they brought it to me and said, enjoy, you know, do whatever you want to with it. Well, I wasn't holding out much hope. So I pulled the back, and staring me in the face was a puffed up 47 microfarad 200 volt cap, and I replaced that capacitor. And my mother watched that TV on a daily basis from whenever I fixed it up until she went in the hospital here, December 2022. So I guess we can say that TV has held up pretty good. I did more recently go through all the televisions and turn down all the backlights, but honestly, I don't watch the flat screen TVs much. I watch the old Zenith TV. About the only time I fool with watching a flat screen is when I turn the one in the kitchen on to listen to the local news. But it's getting so they talk more about stuff that's going on everywhere else rather than stuff going on here. I have to rely on another outlet to find out what really goes on here. And I know what that's about. The local channel that I watch on TV, they've probably been told by the powers that be to suppress all of the crime that's going on around here because they want to make this city look good. Well, it's really not that great, but I won't get off on a rant about that. So let's try to get this TV apart, see what LED is faulty, and like I said, if we end up damaging something, it's no big deal because they didn't cost me anything in the first place. If I can get one or more of them going, then maybe I can make a few dollars off of them, but I'm not going to spend any noticeable amount of money on any of them, because unlike 30-something years ago when somebody could sell any kind of old TV they had that worked, it's not really that way today. In today's world, people want the biggest and the best, and they want it for nothing. You know, there's a couple of pawn shops here, and to my knowledge, they will not take a TV that's over 2 years old, and one of them told me that if it's not a large screen smart set that's 2 years old or newer, I will not take it in, because these older TVs that are not smart capable, I can't hardly give them away. People just will not buy them. And he said if I can sell them, he says he can't get enough out of them to even make it worth his while to fool with them. So, you know, I understand that. But maybe we can have some fun with these sets and might surprise myself and actually get one or more of them going. Who knows? Alright, we have the ribbon cable from the panel disconnected. We have another cable on our front panel controls that are attached to the bezel here. And something else I noticed, the Magnavox TV in the kitchen, from the outside it looks identical to this Emerson. Both sets made by Funai. I believe these were also sold under the Sylvania and possibly the Symphonic brands, but believe it or not, the control for the Magnavox does nothing for this TV. So either the remote sensor is jacked up on this set, or Funai used different codes for each TV brand. Now, something I discovered by watching YouTube videos is there are a couple of different versions of this set. This version here has the separate power supply, main board, and T-con board. There's a slightly newer version of this set that actually has everything on one circuit board, which I guess that makes it simple. You just change out one board and that's it. You know, it's either going to be a bad board or a bad panel. I've never opened the Magnavox that's in the kitchen, and I'm not going to open it until there's a need to. But it may be the newer version with the single board in it. Alright, I carefully disconnected the ribbon cable that connects the front panel controls to the main board. It just simply slides in, and of course when I'm ready to run a test I'll need to connect that back up in order to do that. But now you see we need to remove these metal retainers here, and then I think once we do that we should be able to carefully lift everything out and access the LED strips. And I think this one actually only has one strip in it. You know, real cheap television. Alright, we have the metal side and bottom retainer pieces off, and now we need to unclip this circuit board that is part of the panel and connects to the panel via these ribbon type cables. And this is where we want to be very careful. You know, we don't want to damage this if we can. And you can see it has these little plastic clips that hold the board in place. Alright, little circuit board is dismounted. We have one clip there and one clip there, and you can see the two cables that are permanently attached, one here and one here. Now ideally we'd need a suction cup or two to put on here and just lift the panel out, but I don't have that handy, so I'm going to have to try to do this without the suction cup and hope we don't destroy anything in the process. Let's make sure there's no other wiring to be disconnected, and I don't think there is. Alright, the panel is now removed and sitting in a safe place. Now we need to get the diffuser out of here, and I think that should just lift out. Okay, we need to lift out these plastic pieces as well to get the diffuser out. Alright, we're down to the LED strips here, and this has what? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 6, 17 LEDs there. So we need to try to get our front panel controls connected back up, and then we're going to fire this thing up and see if all LEDs illuminate. What I'm thinking we're going to see is we're going to see one or more of them that either will not light at all or will light considerably dimmer than the others, and then that'll tell us which ones are actually bad. Well, I saw it flash, but it was so quick. Let's just keep trying it until we see something here. Well, it looks like the camera's going to go out of focus. Now actually it looks like all LEDs are lighting up at equal brightness. I actually powered it on by looking at 2 at a time, and they all look to be okay. So we might have tore this thing all apart for nothing. Alright, the next order of business, and this probably should have been the first order of business, would have saved myself a lot of disassembly here. We're going to take the ESR meter, test all of these capacitors. We're going to test these diodes, make sure they're all good. And then we'll check these MOSFETs on the back of the board here, make sure none of those are shorted, which I doubt that they are, because if they were, I think we'd blow the fuse. But we'll check just to be on the safe side. And if nothing is wrong there, then we're going to connect everything back up and disconnect the T-con board and see if the lamps will stay on. And if they do, that will tell us that something on the T-con board is loading it down and causing the problem. But I don't, after pulling everything apart, I don't think it's an LED fault, because they're all glowing at equal brightness. None of them look discolored or anything like that. So that's where we are at this point. If you're wondering what that noise in the background is, that's the attic fan running that's been in this house since it was built in 1963. Trying to hold off on turning the air conditioner on for as long as possible, because I like that reasonably priced power bill. I don't like that $300 power bill, and I want to try to hold off on turning the air conditioner on for as long as possible. Now, when my mother was alive, you know, with her having COPD and heart issues, it didn't matter if it was 40 degrees outside. If she was having trouble breathing or was excessively hot, that air conditioner was coming on, and that's just the way it was. And of course, I never said a word to her about it. We had an agreement a long time ago, if one of us gets hot or cold, then we're going to make the appropriate adjustments to the thermostat. So that's pretty much where we left it. But like I said, I'm going to try to keep that air off for as long as possible. Well, everything checks out except this diode here, which, judging by the symbol I'm seeing under it, it looks like a Zener diode. And according to my meter, it's dead shorted both ways, which indicates that either the diode itself is shorted or something across it or in its path is shorted to ground. So that could be our issue right there, as I will now show you. See on the meter, it's reading dead shorted. So let's flip the leads around. Leads reversed and dead shorted. So yeah, I think I really made this probably more difficult than it should have been. I went in the reverse order than what I should have done, just assuming that the LED strip was at fault, and I got too hasty to tear all that out when it looks like the problem might very well be right on this board right here. Well, it may not be the Zener diode, it may be something else, because I lifted one end of the Zener diode, and as you can see, it's now not shorted. And reverse the leads, and it's now reading like it's supposed to do. So that's why you always want to lift the part out of circuit before just assuming that it's defective, because it could be something else in that part's path that is shorted and making it look like that part is bad. Yeah, there's definitely still a short across there, so most likely whatever is supplied from that voltage source there's a short there, and that's what's causing the power supply to go into shutdown. It's not the LEDs, it's something on here. Alright, whatever that Zener's purpose is, it's reference to hot ground, which is the area shaded in white here, and the cold ground, it will be on the secondary side of the switching transformer here. But I feel like that they're using that as some kind of voltage reference for the power supply regulation, and if that's screwed up, then yes, that could very well cause the power supply to go into shutdown. Now we got to find out what's shorted, and The MOSFETs appear to be okay. It's probably going to be one of these little surface mount doohickeys that I just really don't like fooling with. That's something else I try to stay away from, even though we were taught about some of that when I took electronics in high school. I remember one day, without warning, our instructor threw each one of us a kit, and he said, "I don't want to hear nothing about any missing parts." And that's all he would tell us. And it was one of those electronic Ouija board decision maker type kits that was mostly all surface mounted stuff. That was the first time I'd ever really had any dealings with surface mounted stuff, so I put mine together under that electronic video magnifier that I used to read stuff with, and it wouldn't work. And then he looked at it and saw all kind of bad solder connections, and I showed him the soldering iron I used, one with a tip that was too big, and he said, "Well, here's the reason right here. You don't need to use a soldering iron with a tip that big on it." So he corrected the numerous bad solder connections that I made, and he said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but about the best grade I'm going to be able to give you is a C-." And I said, "Well, I appreciate your generosity," and that was that. And that kit stayed around here for the longest time, and I think it probably got tossed in one of my cleaning out purging attempts. And on a circuit board with 100% through hole components, it's not nearly as big of an issue. You just start pulling suspected components loose until you find out when the short goes away, and then you know which direction to go in. Well, when you've got 98% through hole parts here that we don't even know what they are, could put it under my magnifier and see what some of them are based on the location numbers, but it's a lot more difficult when you got mostly surface mounted parts. Now this resistor, I'm going to pull one end of that loose and see if we can determine which direction our short is in, but that's really about all I know to do at this point. Alrighty. Okay, so the anode of the diode connects to cold ground, hot ground. The cathode of the diode connects to this resistor here, and we were reading a short from the cathode to ground. I've lifted the other end of this resistor that does not connect to the diode, and now let's see what we get. Alright, our short appears to have gone away. So whatever shorted is something on this side of the resistor that we disconnected. Now with this resistor loose, let me just check it and see if it's still good. Okay, I disconnected one end of this jumper, and the short still remains here, so it's not going off this direction somewhere. It's somewhere right in this area. Well, you're not going to believe this. I don't even believe it, but I found a service manual online for this TV, and they actually show us a schematic diagram of the power supply, and D608 is what we're interested in. You know, it measured shorted across it, but it wasn't the diode, because when we removed the diode, the thing cleared up. And then this D608A, that says open, so does that mean that there's not a diode in that position? Or is that a surface mounted diode that could be shorted? Well, I think I see why we're reading basically 0 ohms. We have this R611, which is essentially in parallel with this diode here, so I fail to see what they're doing here. I don't know. I don't understand this. Why do they have a resistor that's almost a short in parallel with this diode? So, you know, I might have been chasing something that I didn't really need to chase. And that goes up there to the source connection of the switching MOSFET. Well, so I might not be up to anything after all. Alright, I was looking at the LEDs one more time, and there's one that looks like it might be a little dimmer than the rest, but it flicks on and flicks off so quick that I really can't tell. So there's a couple of things I could try. First thing I could do is power the LEDs from an external source. And the second thing, which is what I'm going to try here, is I have broken the line here going to the LEDs, and I've inserted a resistor in that line in an effort to limit the current to see if we can make the thing stay on. And like I said earlier, this is just a more or less of an experimental thing. If we blow up something, so what? As you can see, it still flickered and didn't stay on. Well, maybe if I press the right button. Okay, let's move up to a bigger resistor. Okay, moved up to a 68 ohm. Let's see what happens. Well, looks like nothing's going to happen. Okay, it did the same thing, flickered and went off. Alright, now we have an 82 ohm. Same thing. Not as bright, but same thing. It is not staying on. Now we have the 82 and the 33 in series to give us what, approximately 110 ohms. No difference. Now we're up to about 180 ohms. Okay, same story. Alright, now I want to flip it up and turn it on, and since the LEDs are dimmer now, maybe I can more easily spot a bad one. So let's see. Well, turning this on several times, I'm not seeing any deficiency in any of the LEDs. They all look to be equally bright, so but something is causing this thing to shut down. What happened to the good old days when something shorted, it went up in smoke, and in that way you could easily see what was wrong. In these newer sets, there's all kind of a fault detection circuitry, and the least little thing goes wrong and it just shuts the TV down. And all that happens here, this comes up for a second, I can briefly see the Emerson logo in the center of the screen, and then it just shuts off. Just for the heck of it, I pulled the main board, and I don't see anything burn or blown up on this. I realize that doesn't mean anything, but just had to look and see, and I don't see anything. Well, I was going to do something that a lot of the 70s TV repairmen did when they weren't quite sure what was going on. They just swapped the module and see what happens. So I opened up the other TV that I told you looks just like this one, except it's a Magnavox branded set, and this one's an Emerson, and the Magnavox remote won't turn this set on. So, but I figured they both had the same power board in them, and I could just swap the power board around, see if this one would stay on. And this just gives you an example of what they do. This set here is from 2013, the Magnavox is from 2012. Pull the back, different boards all together on the inside, even though on the outside they look identical. But you know, in the old days, like RCA or Zenith, for example, they might make a basic television chassis for 4 or 5 years and it use interchangeable modules and other parts, but these newer televisions, not so much. In fact, I've seen sets that had the same model number on them that would have different innards. I guess it all depended on what they could get out of which Chinese factory at any given time. So, and that's just another reason why, in 50 years, these sets are not going to be repairable like some of the ones that me and Shango and many others find that are 50 plus years old and we can get them going. And the reason these newer sets are not likely going to be repairable in 50 years is because of all the proprietary components they use that in many cases are hard enough to find in today's world, let alone 50 years from now. Many of the older sets that we service, there's some of them use proprietary parts, and sometimes we run into problems when those proprietary parts fail, but many of the older sets use what you would call off-the-shelf components, resistors, capacitors, tubes, tube sockets, stuff like that. And when something like that fails in one of them, it's no big deal to come up with a substitute part to replace it. But in one of these types of sets here, you pretty much have to stick with what it came with, or you're going to be out of luck. So I'm thinking with this set, I'm about ready to throw in the towel on it. Yes, I could go online and start ordering boards, but I'm not going to do that. Like I think I've already mentioned, I don't want to spend any money on this junk because I know I'm not going to get any money out of it. This was more or less just a time waster to see if we could come up with something. We can't, so I think at this point it's just time to forget it and not worry about it. I don't think the trouble is the T-Con board because I disconnected it and it still did the same thing. I can't disconnect the logic board because we need the logic board to tell the power supply to turn on. But the problem is either going to be on the power supply board or this logic board. And with all the surface mounted crap and traces that you can't hardly see, or at least I can't, I'm not even going to try to trace this crap out, not even with the service manual. So, we checked it out. We went further with it than I really anticipated going in the first place. I still don't have any conclusive results, so I don't even think I'm going to bother putting this back together. I'm just going to pitch it, and that'll be the end of it. Alright, maybe not quite done with it yet. With the current limiting resistor in place, I may have found a bad LED, and I'm having to do this by holding these pieces of cardboard here to help shield the light from the other ones from messing with my vision. And it looks like this LED is not lighting up here. Let me push the button and we will see. Bear with me a minute. I think it might have lit up dimmer than the other ones. Let's see. Let me try again. Well, are you not going to do something for me? Okay, let me move down to the next one and see what we get. I don't know. Okay, to my eyes, with lower voltage, this LED here doesn't appear to be doing much of anything. However, I'm seeing some on the camera. But I think this LED right here is defective. Now, ideally, we'd need to replace this whole strip. because if one has failed, you know the rest of them probably hadn't got long for this world. Alright, we're down here on the workbench, otherwise known as the disaster area, and we're powering these LEDs from an external source. That way they'll stay on all the time. It won't be just a brief flick. So what we've done here, we have our Heathkit variable AC power supply that, as I'm sure you know, will allow me to go from 0 volts on up to past 120. And what I've done, I've constructed a bridge rectifier and a filter capacitor right there, as you can see. And we have the output of the bridge rectifier connected to our LED strip here. And then we have our DC voltmeter connected to monitor the voltage, and now we'll turn it on and bring it up slowly and see what happens. And see, now we're starting to have illumination with 55 volts input, and as you can see, this LED right here is definitely non-functional. Now, since all the rest of them are lighting up, then that tells us that this LED is shorted. If it was open, there wouldn't be any illumination because the circuit would be broken. So 56, 58 volts, and the rest of them look to be equally illuminated. It's just this one right here that's out and throwing the whole thing out of whack. And we're drawing about 25 milliamps here, looks like. And of course, as we increase the input voltage, the current draw goes up. So that's Ohm's law working for you. Now we're drawing almost about 57 milliamps. Well, I goofed up. I reconnected my LED strip and I got the polarity backwards, and well, now we not only have one burned out, we have two more burned out. So yeah, we're gonna have to, it ticks me off, but I'm sure those two were probably near death anyway. Like I think I've already said, if one's bad, the rest are probably on their way out, and me goofing up and connecting the power supply voltage backwards was enough to make the other ones go kapooey. I could have saved myself a lot of time and headache had I just used this method to start with. Now, they make an LED strip tester solely for the purpose of repairing flat panel TVs, but no more of these types of sets than I plan on working on. I don't really see the need to purchase such an item. I can do it just the way we're doing it here with our variable AC power supply feeding a bridge rectifier and filter network, and then we can do basically the same thing. And if I have to measure current, I can put my multimeter in line with it or whatever. So, but at least I know that me pulling everything apart wasn't a total waste. We do indeed have some bad LEDs, but an optical illusion was making me think that we didn't have bad LEDs. But like I said, this is what I should have done first thing, just powered this LED strip from an external source, and then we could have seen what was going on. Now I have the LEDs marked that are burned out, so we can replace them. Alright, this little lens just is glued in place. It just pops off, and there's the little LED right there. Now I can't really show you this on camera because I have to have both hands to hold my meter probes, but this is shorted, dead shorted. Now I was looking on eBay for possible LED replacements. There's a place called Shop Jimmy. I've heard of them, I've never dealt with them, that sell TV parts. And they have what they claim to be the LED strip for this model of set for about 22 bucks. However, the part number they list doesn't correspond to this part number, and this strip has 17 LEDs on it. I think the one they showed had 16. And even though I haven't dealt with them, I've heard some things about them that they don't always get things correct. I did, however, find a couple of Chinese vendors that sell the actual part number for this LED strip for about 18 bucks. But we know the quality of these Chinese parts. A lot of them are so bad they won't even work from the get-go. So that's what I'm leery about. If I knew it would work, I would just order a whole new strip and stick it in there. But not knowing that it's going to work, I don't want to waste money like that. So I've seen YouTube videos of people repairing these LED strips. Now I'll give it a shot, but you know, I don't claim to be a flat screen TV repair expert. Well, I don't consider myself an expert in anything, but even less so with flat screen TV repair, but we'll see what we can do. I'm not having any luck getting this off. And another thing, the ones made in China are actually coming out of China, which means if I ordered one of them, it takes 6 months for it to get here, and I really don't want this TV torn apart on my dining room table for the next 6 months. So what do? Throw it in the garbage? That'd probably be the best thing. Well, I'm not having any luck getting this off of here, so I'm going to explore other options besides eBay, and if I can find this particular LED strip from a domestic vendor that's cheap, I might order one, and then again I might not, because it'll be just my luck. I'll order it and it'll either be non-functional or there'll be something else wrong with the television. Now, as far as these parts for these TVs, you're probably not going to get parts from the manufacturer. Most of the parts you find from these vendors like Shop Jimmy and other places, those are parts that were pulled out of damaged TVs or TVs that were sent in for recycling or whatever. And I have heard of cases where people bought these parts and the parts they got were defective. So, you know, these are not, most of these parts you find out there are not direct from the manufacturer. They're coming from other sources that get the parts out of, like I said, damaged or recycled TVs or whatever. And the part could very well be well used. So, and these manufacturers are not going to supply parts because they don't want you repairing their products. They want you to buy a new one. I know, probably 8 or 10 years ago, a friend of mine had a Dynex Best Buy flat screen TV that died under warranty, and they told him what TV shop to take it to and it would be taken care of. Well, whatever part it needed they couldn't even get, and the TV was under warranty. So they gave my friend store credit, and he used that money to buy an even bigger television and still had money left over. So, you know, it's not like the old days when in 1988 you could still get a 1198-34 flyback transformer from RCA for a CTC 38 console from the late 60s. Those days are over with. Now, I seem to remember a time when manufacturers were required by law to keep parts available for a certain number of years, but I don't think they have to do that anymore. I think all they have to do now is satisfy warranty service, and that's it. And that could mean just either replacing the television or giving the people a refund. I remember towards the end of the CRT era, somebody brought me a big 36-inch RCA that went bad under warranty, and they just simply cut him a check and told him to dispose of the television. Well, I fixed the television. It was a minor repair, and he was happy. So I think right now we're going to be looking at trying to get a new a strip for this. Well, I was able to scrape back to get to some conductive material, but I could not get this off of here, and it's still shorted. I've tried heating it with a soldering iron. I've tried breaking it off with busting it off with a screwdriver. It's stuck. So it's starting to look like my only option is going to be a new strip. Well, I double checked on eBay, and the only one that's exactly like this one is from some Chinese vendor, and like I said, it would take 6 months to get it here. I double checked the one from Shop Jimmy. It has 16 LEDs on it. This one has 17, so I know where that would go. Stick that in the TV and the protection circuit. Oh, you don't have enough LEDs. Shut down. And so no, we're not going there either. So I'm just about a rat's hair away from taking the LED panel, busting it half in two, busting everything else down into a nice manageable size so it'll fit in a garbage bag, and out it goes. But I'm about fed up with this Chi-Commie shit that ain't meant to be serviced. You know, you got something here I need to come off and it won't come off, but then you have things that don't need to come off, like the tab bonds on the cables going to an LCD panel, and they come loose on you and cause all kind of problems. So yeah, I'm just fed up with this garbage. Like I said, don't even know why I bothered bringing these things home in the first place. And I can see it now, and I'm sure some TV shops who still are around working on this junk can probably relate to this. Somebody brings in an LCD television, you tell them the LED strips are bad and it's going to cost X number of dollars to fix, and then they start screaming, it's going to cost that much just to change a light bulb? And then you have to explain to them, well, it's not just a simple matter of pulling the back off and unscrewing the old bulb and putting a new one in. You have to basically completely tear down the television and pray you don't damage anything in the process. So no, I can tell you what, I don't blame all these shops for going out of business. There's just, this junk now is just made too disposable, and it's just not worth the hassle for no more than you're going to get out of it. And while I was trying to get that LED off, my screwdriver slipped and severed. It looks like it severed this trace here, but I'm just not going to deal with this. It's one way to get them off, isn't it? At it with this Chinese garbage. Alright, so I got me a good power cord. Plastic crap, it's very easily broken. You can get compacted down to where it will more nicely fit in a garbage can. This metal, very easily bendable. Got us a pair of crappy speakers that we might can use in something. I don't know what. Let me wad all this crap up. You'll break this plastic down, very brittle. Now this is what I was talking about that fails on a lot of LCD panels. These tab bonds, this cable that goes from this interconnect board to the panel itself, it's not soldered on here, it's glued on. Now if it's glued on as well as those LEDs were, then it shouldn't be a problem, but a lot of times it's not. But now the moment you have all been waiting for. Let's see how fragile the LCD panel is. But first, we need to get an inquisitive dog out of the way. Tyson, come on. Come on, come back here. Alright, thank you very much. Alright, let's see how much torture this LCD panel can take. Ooh! I think we broke it. should make it fit in the garbage bag a lot better now. Alright, so there you go. How to properly repair a modern LCD television. Just bust it up and put it in the trash where it belongs. Alright, here's the power supply board out of Chicami LCD television number 2. This set is totally dead, and I found a couple of shorted diodes, or that's what seems to be the trouble, off of the secondary side here. So let's investigate further, although we're not going to investigate much further. Alright, I have my ohm meter clipped across this diode here, and as you can see, it's dead shorted. That's on the ohms range. Let's put it on the diode scale. Alright, diode scale, dead shorted. Reverse the leads. Come on. Same scenario. Now let's move to the diode next to it. Same scenario, but let's look at the underside of the circuit board here. There are the two diodes right there. As you can see, they're wired in parallel, so if one shorts, it'll make it look like both are shorted. So we're going to have to remove each diode and check them individually and see if it's actually a diode shorted or something off of the secondary that's shorted. I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to do much to this. If the diodes are shorted, I'll replace them. I'll put the board back in the TV. If it powers up, great, and if it doesn't, it'll probably meet the same fate as that other TV. And this set is unbelievably cheaply made. Just wait till I show you. Naturally, the battery's going to die. Alright, this diode's good. It has a forward voltage drop of 0.2. That indicates a fast switching diode. And this diode is shorted. So we're going to pull one off of the Funai board and stick on here. Alright, here's flat screen number 2 in Affinity. Some cheap Chinese junk. I've already installed the board, and this was the stupid stunt they pulled. Instead of mounting the boards here to where they can be easily gotten to, they mount them to the back of the television set. So a typical TV that was not meant to be serviced. So we're going to button it back up. We're going to put the stand on it. We're going to plug it in and hit the power button. If it comes to life, great. If it doesn't, it'll end up getting smashed too. Not in this video, but, and yeah, me smashing that other one, yeah, I'll admit part of that was me smashing it out of disgust, but more of that was to make it to where it would fit inside of a trash bag more easily. Alright, the moment of truth. Well, I didn't hear anything blow up, and the red light is on. Well, that's a little bit promising. Alright, power. The red light turned green. The screen is lighting up, and there it is. Okay. Okay, where is our menu button? Okay, menu right here. Well, get the hang of this. Well, dadgummit. Hold on a minute. Alright, it's scanning for channels. Well, this should take half the day. Alright, it obviously found virtual channel 11. Alright, I won't bore you with this. I'll be back when it's done. So far we found 26 channels. I think that's about what we have here. But I'll let it complete its scan. Alright, there we go.
Seemed like it was a book.
I bet I can solve compensation, even if you smoked.
So nothing new since I left.
Well, it looks pretty good.
I gotta get going, okay?
I think 11.6 is the channel that used to have the test pattern on it that said coming soon for the past about year and a half.
Let's see what this has done to Papa. I mean,
Maybe 2008, so
I'm actually talking to you from
6th, 7th, and 8th grade. If you know the
Yeah, maybe since the test pattern's gone, maybe they're getting ready to do something with this.
doctor.
Well, not exactly.
MacGyver.
But she did always say I was pretty good with my hands.
Used to watch that show whenever I was a kid, and yeah, gotta love this digital crap. Well, that probably shouldn't get us in any kind of copyright trouble. Well, that one's still got the test pattern on it.
And I didn't take pictures.
Julia says...
As far as what to do with this, I could sell it, but I'm getting so... Adam 12, I'm getting so I have issues with trying to sell anything, and here's why. Because too many people have the Walmart mentality. To give you an example, a friend of mine was telling me a story that him and his cousin were out riding around and they stopped at a yard sale.
The loss of these families.
School shooting in Nashville today.
Lost by these children and their families.
But anyway, they stopped at a yard sale, and my friend's cousin found a DVD player, or actually it was a Blu-ray player, I think. And the guy running the sale said he wanted $5 for it. He said, "I'll hook it up and show you it works." And the guy said, "No, I'll take your word for it." So he bought it. Him and my friend went home. They hooked it up, and it wouldn't work. And then he wanted my friend to take him back to the yard sale so he could either get his money back or trade it for the other DVD player that he had.
I want you to understand.
So he took it back to the yard sale.
Thank you, Mayor Cooper. Again, thank you all for being here.
He took it back to the yard sale, and the guy let him have another DVD player that he had, but I told my friend.
As Audrey Hale, 28-year-old female that lived in the Nashville area.
Okay, a woman. But had that been me, I'd have just ate the $5 and forgot about it. I would not be bringing something back to a yard sale to get my $5 back. But, so you get the idea. This is why I don't really like selling stuff, because even if I sold this to somebody for $25 and it stopped working in a week, they'd just be hassling me about it. So I'm probably just going to keep it around here for a spare TV. So I guess we can successfully add 4 successful flat screen repairs to my resume now. Alright, I'm on something that maybe won't get me in any copyright trouble. As far as that school shooting, I mean, yes, I think it's a terrible thing, terrible tragedy. I think anybody watching this video would probably agree. However, I don't think grabbing everybody's gun, which is what the ultimate goal is going to solve the problem. And I find it very despicable that certain politicians will use something like that to advance their own agenda. You know, like I've said, you know, never let a good tragedy go to waste, and that's exactly what they'll do with this. In fact, Brandon will probably be breaking into your standard dose of trash TV later on to give his gun grabbing speech. Now, far as TV channels, we got 20-something channels here, so who needs cable when I can get all the trash TV I want for nothing? Unfortunately, we do not have a home shopping channel here like Shango has out in his area. They probably didn't add one to this area because they know that nobody has any money here. By the time they're done at the liquor store and the cell phone store and the medical marijuana dispensary, then you know they're about out of money. Yeah, everybody thinks the miracle marijuana dispensary is just the greatest thing to ever happen, and I'm sure there are some people who could legitimately benefit from that, but I think there's going to be a lot of people going to the number of doctors they need to get a license or prescription or whatever it's called, and then they will you know, grease those doctors to give them whatever they need to get the stuff when they really don't need it. It'll end up being just like with the prescription pain pills that people were abusing and in some cases still abusing. So, yeah, I just take issue with that. This TV, to be a cheapo, no-name Chinese special, it has a pretty decent picture on it. And even though the build quality sucks, you know, sometimes these lower-end sets will fool you with the performance and the longevity of them. Now, I don't know, this might die tonight, it might work for 10 years, who knows. I remember in the early 2000s, a family member bought a 24-inch Apex TV, and he was just going on about what a good deal he got on it. It was already on sale, and by the time he used his coupon, the TV was under $100. And I said, well, you know, you get what you pay for it, and don't be surprised if the day after the 90-day warranty expires, it dies on you. Well, I was wrong about that one. It lasted about 11 or 12 years before the vertical sweep collapsed on it, and by that time he was ready for a flat screen, so he wasn't interested in getting it fixed, so he gave it to me, and it had a cold solder connection on the vertical output IC. I resoldered the IC and the TV worked great. But then on the other hand, I've had some of the better known sets like Sony and Zenith and RCA from the same time period that didn't last as long as that cheapo set did and had failures that made the set not worth repairing. So you just never know, you know. This TV, if I do decide to sell it, I'll probably ask about 35 bucks for it. Like it sits, no remote. And if somebody wants it, they're going to be made aware that you buy it, it's yours. You know, there's not going to be no, you buy something for 30 to 35 bucks, there's no bringing it back whenever you either decide you don't want it, or it stops working, or your kid hits it with a baseball bat. And that's something else that people used to call me about. Oh, I bought a new TV and my kid hit it with a baseball bat. How much is it going to cost to fix? And I always make their day when I tell them more than what you paid for the television because the panel's busted. I'm thinking to myself, that kid needs a good butt warming. I knew better than to hit our TV. Of course, it would have taken a good bit to have broken our TV, but I knew better than to do something like that, or otherwise I would have still had a sore butt. But these kids today, they're not brought up like many of us were. You know, the good doctor, I think I'd rather watch Trapper John MD or Marcus Welby MD instead, or maybe even Medical Center. But no, a new television is something I have never purchased, and really don't see any time that I'm going to be purchasing one, because even whenever I was a young teenager, I could always come up with a TV somewhere to fix and watch. And even if I didn't have any flat screens here, I don't mind watching a CRT set, and there's still plenty of them to be found. So In fact, the TV I watch the most is a CRT set. That 84 Zenith that I did a video on a year or two ago, that's what I watch more than anything. But this TV, chances are it's just going to get stuck back somewhere. Might need it down the road, you never know. And I'd rather just keep it here as a spare than try to sell it and have to deal with all the BS that goes along with trying to sell something on Facebook Marketplace these days. Here's the Hitachi, and you can see what it's currently doing. When I first got the set and turned it on, it actually had a picture, but it had these colored vertical lines, thin vertical lines across the screen. And then on the top here, it had these thin black horizontal lines running across the top, and then it also had the same lines running across the bottom. Well, I went inside and was playing with the ribbon cables going from the T-Con board to the panel, and it started doing all sort of weird things. I lost my picture, and at one point I just had like these colored bands here. So I think the trouble is either going to be those ribbon cables, or more than likely it's going to be what I showed you on that Funai panel before I busted it up to put it in the trash. The tab bonds on the cable that interface between the interconnect board and the panel are probably defective because the glue starts to give way, you know, and I might can go inside and press around on those cables and get the picture back, but then we'll have to figure out a way to apply pressure to those cables. But even at that, even if I get it working that way, this won't be a TV that we sell under those conditions. I wouldn't do anything like that for such a jake leg repair, because it might not hold up. You know, I might give it to someone, but and tell them this is what was done to it. It's free. I hope it lasts a while. If it doesn't, throw it away. Alright, the Affinity is still doing okay. Now let's open this one up. Now, whoever owned this set was a dirty slob. This thing is filthy. Alright, here's the inside of the Hitachi. Very plasticky on the inside, but at least this one has the boards mounted in a more traditional manner to make it a little easier to service. This is the T-Con board. These are the two ribbon cables that go from the T-Con board to the panel, and then we have this these two interface boards on the panel. One takes care of the left side of the panel, the other one takes care of the right side of the panel, and the boards are connected to the panel via these ribbon style cables. And this is what happens here. The glue that they use to hold the tab bonds in place breaks loose, and they don't make good contact anymore. And a lot of times you can press on these and make connection, but then you got to come up with some creative way to hold them in place. But as far as the problem we're having, it can be caused by the panel, to include these cables here. It can be caused by these ribbon cables. It can be caused by the T-Con board, or even the main board. But we're not going to spend any money on this set. If it looks like we're going to have to start changing boards, then it will also be scrapped for parts. Alright, I pulled the right hand T-Con cable loose to the panel, and as you can see, the right hand side of the screen is white, while the other side is real dark and kind of multicolored, as you can see. Now I've got the left hand ribbon cable loose, and now the left hand side is white, but in addition, part of the right hand side is white too. Okay, cables are hooked back up, and we're basically back to like we were, just a gray black screen with all of these vertical lines everywhere. I wished I could get a picture back on here. Like I said before, we had a picture that was jittery and bouncy with all the lines in it, but somehow or another that disappeared. Alright, I've got the cable from the main board to the T-con disconnected, and we still have I can see a few faint lines. Well, they might have faded away, but now we've just got a dark screen. And I plugged the cable from the main to the T-con back in, and now we have probably 3/4 of the screen is black, but we have this white bar here with all of the vertical lines in it. So whatever this seems to be an intermittent condition. Well, I can tell you this IC right here is running hot enough to burn me. The rest of them are cool as a cucumber, but this one is burning my hand, my finger. I can't even hold it. Right now we have the white band over on the far right side of the screen, and everything else is black. Alright, I just flipped open the right hand side ribbon cable and closed the connector back with the set on, and now we have this again. This is just very weird. Alright, with the panel disconnected, that chip is still getting hot as a firecracker. I know some of these get rather warm, but I wouldn't think it would be so hot that it would burn my finger when I touched it. I mean, the processor on this main board is getting warm, but I can hold my finger on it. And that chip, that's not even warm at all. So what about this one? That one's not warm. This one's not warm. This one's not warm. That one is burning hot. Alright, ribbon cable's back hooked up. This is what we get. This crap on the right hand side. The rest of the screen is dark. I'm going to swap the ribbon cables around and see what that does. Alright, ribbon cables are swapped, and it appears to be doing basically the same thing, so that pretty much rules out the ribbon cables being defective. And again, the camera is going to go out of focus, but I disconnected the cable from the main board to the T-con again, and we just have a blank screen here. And I just disconnected the cable from the main board to the T-con live, and we're back to a black screen, but now we have the vertical lines here. With the T-con still disconnected and with the lines on the screen, I pressed very hard on this tab bond cable thingy here, and the lines faded out, so that's not really a good sign. I'm starting to think this one's probably not worth repairing either, and I'm probably going to end the video here. If I come up with something else, I'll let you know. If you could give me some compelling reasons why this set may be fixable, we might revisit it again. But I'm starting to think this one is probably going to be going to be more involved than it's worth. All right, T-con's back. We have this on the right hand side, and then we're starting to see the lines again on the rest of the screen. I just really don't know what happened, because when I first tested this set off camera, it had a picture. It was just all jittery and jumpy, and it's had the vertical and horizontal lines that I described earlier. The vertical lines all over the screen like this, and the horizontal black lines at the top and bottom of the screen. And then when I opened it up and played with it and was playing around with these cables, then I lost my picture and got what you see now, and that's when I decided maybe I would do a video on these sets after all. Yeah, I could probably get online and throw boards at this, but there's a problem. That involves money that I don't want to spend on this. And like we've determined, just because you get a board off of eBay from some website that sells TV parts, that don't necessarily mean you're going to get a good board, because a lot of those boards are used boards anyway. So, you know, my idea, like I've mentioned in the past, a flat screen TV repair is like what we did to that one. Find a shorted diode, find a puffed up cap, change those. You're back in business. Something that's simple that can be taken care of without much effort or money. Now, if this was still the old days, back when flat screens were very expensive and I could have got $300 for a set like this, then it might be worth throwing a little money at it. But when you're doing good to get $35 for a TV like this, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to continue to throw money at it. So we're going to end this for now, and like I said, if you can offer any suggestions, those of you who are more into flat screen servicing than I am, if you can offer me any suggestions that might lead to something I'm overlooking here, then you know, I'd love to hear from you. But this one's looking like it's going to most likely go to the junk heap too. It's just not worth putting the money in. And I've read about putting the boards in the oven to reflow the solder on them, but I'm not so sure that's an issue here, because I physically pressed in on these boards, this one and the main board. The only thing that I think might have got me a little somewhere was whenever I pressed on this ribbon cable here, but still, I'm not sure that really did anything. It might have just decided it was going to straighten out. I don't know. But like I said, if you've got any advice before I scrap this, then let's hear it.